All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. This week we have a guest, Dean Abbott. How are you?
Good. How are you?
First heard about you on Twitter,
Uh-huh. I've been
and
doing that
then
for a
I
while.
heard something special. I'm sorry,
I've been doing that for a while. Twitter.
Twitter. So much
Mhm.
fun. I,
Mhm.
I I love Twitter so much. I mean, people complain about it all the time, but ultimately, what I say, it's just people expressing their thoughts and feelings. I mean, what could be
Right.
better than that?
One of the points I make all the time to people is, um, you're not a victim to your own social media applications. Like
Yeah,
you're like everyone you follow on
it's an
Twitter.
algorithm. It's a mirror.
Right.
Don't you get that? You're complaining
Uh,
about TikTok. It's just showing you what you are.
right. Right.
It's
And
hilarious.
also, no one comes to your house and forces you to follow anyone on Twitter. Right. That's the thing that always seems crazy to me is like people literally complaining about the timelines on Twitter that they built. It's like, you know,
It's it's awesome. I mean, it's beautiful in a way because it just shows that we have this undercurrent of feeling and emotion that has a reason all to itself. And
mhm,
if you want to feel like a victim, you're
right,
gonna figure out a way to feel like a victim, right? It
right.
doesn't matter how smart you are. And of course, that's
Mm,
what we talk about here. I mean, I don't know how much you know about me, but this is a psychology channel. I'm a
right,
therapist. And so we talk about you're doing something that you don't want to do, supposedly.
right.
You're
Why
on
do you want to do
TikTok four
something you
hours
don't
a
want to
day,
do?
complaining about all these people on TikTok you don't like. Well, you're playing into that. That's just a mirror that shows you what's going on.
Right.
And if we want to feel like a victim, I would argue if we have anxiety that we don't know how to manage, you're going to feel like a victim. And in a way, that's the modern predicament is everybody feels like a victim, yet no one is.
Right. Well, the way I phrased it just now was, why do you want to do these things you don't want to do? Right. Like, why do you want to be
Right.
on TikTok for 4 hours a day when you don't want to be on TikTok for 4 hours a day?
Right. What does that do for you?
Right.
How does that serve you? How is that in fact an important piece of your life and a story that you tell yourself about who you are? And sorry to all the mindset guys out there. I don't know where you stand on this, but I'm very anti-mindset CBT. Sorry to all the
Mhm.
mindset guys out there. Doing your affirmations isn't going to help
Yeah.
because
Again, I don't know how much you want to get into this kind of thing, but um, it seems pretty clear to me as soon as you begin to examine any like anything like this, any behavior that people complain about, that it quickly goes beyond the kind of conscious and cognitive um, realm into, like you were saying a moment ago, this sort of current of underlying emotion and belief that most people just aren't conscious of.
right.
Mhm.
Of course. I mean, what would be the other explanation? If I mean, that's what I always say. If you want to change something about yourself, but you can't change it, if you're still complaining about it a week later, well, then by definition, there's an unconscious issue there.
Right. Oh yeah. Right.
People talk about like a scientific validity to an unconscious. We look at neuroscience and all that, and that all might have some merit, but ultimately, just philosophically, we can extend it. Oh, look, you're doing something that you supposedly don't want to do. By definition, there's an unconscious issue there that is affecting you. Again, by
Sure.
definition, outside of your awareness.
Right.
And that's
Right.
really the point of therapy. And just something to look at about yourself is if you're complaining about Twitter or TikTok or Insta or whatever. It's just that's
Right.
a
So
mirror.
so if I ask you why do you do that, and you cannot give me any kind of full reason, that's a that's a sign that you're not consciously aware of why you do it.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. And I think that's ultimately the point of therapy is not only give the reason why, but actually go back and explain where that comes from and why you would want to feel that way.
Yes, 100%.
So, anyways, yeah, we saw you on Twitter and I've been following you for a while. Great tweets, insightful. I definitely recommend everybody go follow you. I mean, I'll put your Twitter handle
Oh,
underneath my video here. I mean, don't count on a huge upswing in followers for me.
right,
Not
right.
exactly a popular channel here, but
If
I
yeah, if my Twitter following doubles, we'll know why.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I well anyways, it's just but I'll put your Twitter handle up there. But I don't know. I guess there's a lot of overlap there between Twitter and people complaining about it and this book that we want to talk about. Hopefully you want to talk about the book and not the musical. Sure. I didn't ask you that before, because the musical is just god awful. I mean, not just the fact that it's a musical. Do you have an opinion on that? I tried to watch it. It was on PBS one time, and it was about halfway through. It was actually the barricade scene. It was on PBS. I'm like, oh, sweet. I never actually. I'm going to sit down and watch this, and I couldn't make it through 5 minutes. It was terrible.
Well, I've seen the musical. I've seen the musical on stage, and I've seen the film. Well, with Hugh Jackman, of course, and I adore it. I love the music. I love it all.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, maybe you're just a bigger fan than I am of it.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, I just couldn't make. I'm just not a fan of musicals. I mean, obvious commentary there about being a guy not liking musicals. I did kind of like Book of Mormon.
Yeah, I've not seen that.
but even that just got. I mean, it's 3 hours. I mean, come on, guys. Anyway.
I think the musical of Les Mis kind of distills the essence of what is of the sort of the underlying moral story of Jean Valjean's development.
You think so?
Well enough that the average person who's not going to sit down and read, a 700-page novel, could benefit from it. 700.
It's more like 1283. I mean, that's my Signet Classic, which I think is the one that you need to get. Yeah. Well, okay. So I'm trying to remember now, because actually my first podcast episode way back in 2012, I think.
Oh, wow.
It must have been in 2012, because it was right after the movie came out, based on the musical in 2012. And the reason I didn't like it, okay, so there were 3 reasons. The one of them being is that after the bishop, in a sense, buys Jean Valjean's soul by saying, no, I actually lent him the silverware and, these silver candlesticks that, Jean Valjean in fact stole after being let out of prison after 19 years.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is so psychologically important about the book is even after that, even after the bishop does that to Jean Valjean, he still goes and steals the coin from that little boy.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
and I think that
repents, right, because he steals it, but he give it back. I can't remember, but I know that he
tries.
He thinks
like in that moment he tries, but the little boy, the petit gervais, he gets away, so he can't find him anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he repents. That's when he breaks down. That's when he says, it prays in a sense, and says, why must I be such a miserable man?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's the start of the transformation. And I think that is very, just incredibly on point psychologically. I mean, and that's maybe something else we're going to talk about. It's just the psychological importance of these novels. And this is, I mean, I would argue in a sense, this is what psychology was even before there was psychology in the 19th century. I mean, psychology was starting as a field, but, trying to be treated very much as a science, as a hard science, like neuroscience is now.
Right.
I just think where you went for psychological information and sustenance was these stories. I mean, very much like the Bible. Sure. But, after the invention of the printing press, we could print, 100-page books. And, that was a technology that we didn't really have. So, we could explicate this side of humanity, this psychological side that really couldn't be demonstrated in plays. Yeah. And what else did I...
You were saying the 3 reasons you didn't like the musical.
Right. And the other reason is that they treated it as Fantine's low point when she was a prostitute, which the novel didn't treat it that way. The novel treated Fantine's low point as the loss of her hair and her teeth, the loss of her beauty. And I guess, maybe treating it, the prostitution as a low point, that's more, more palpable, I guess. Right. So I guess I can't be too upset about that. And the other thing, it is very similar to that. The other thing, and this is actually why I stopped watching the musical, is they made it seem like her factory job, Fantine's working in Jean Valjean's factory. Right. Her factory job is what it couldn't provide for right? She wasn't getting a living wage, so to speak.
Mhm.
He couldn't provide for her properly, and that's why she had to go live on the streets. When in fact, when you read the book, it's the woman gossiping about her, and she has Cosette. You know, she has
Right.
this
Right.
a child out of wedlock, and she gets fired because of that. It gets fired. She gets fired because of the gossiping woman. You
Mhm.
know, showing this. I don't want to get too political, but showing this, dark side of femininity that
Right.
we don't see
But
portrayed
but
too
I
readily
think
right
that
now.
I do think that's in the film, right? It's there during the whole scene where in the film when Fontaine is in the factory. Um, I can't remember the name of the song, but it's very clear that all of the other women are being catty and that they all are kind of jealous of her,
Huh.
and that what sparks the whole incident, which ends with her dismissal, is um, their kind of emotional immaturity and cruelty toward her.
Okay.
So I do think that's in there.
Well, I could be wrong about that. I
Well,
think by that time I was primed to not like it.
but either way, like I said, I think that the musical is enough to be beneficial to many people.
Yeah.
Raising issues.
Yeah. And so what is the point of the well, let me just ask you. So when did you first read it? How did you get into it? Because this isn't I guess it's a story that a lot of people like, but when you talk about the book, most people, kind of go blank and say, have you seen
Right.
how big
No,
that is?
I saw it on stage in 1990, 1991, a long, long time ago. And then I actually listened to the audiobook just several years later, and then I saw the film. I probably didn't see the Hugh Jackman film until um probably 2015, maybe, no, 2017 or 18. And I actually don't think I saw that film until I was about to use it in an ethics class I was teaching. I showed it to a group of students, and we had it as a discussion piece.
Oh,
Um,
what was the discussion about?
well, it was about okay. This was like an introductory course in ethics to community college students, none of whom are going to be serious philosophers, right? And so we had, Les Mis, it represents artistically multiple sorts of moral questions and dilemma after dilemma for Jean Valjean. And so we had lots of discussion about, did he do the right thing? Why did he do the right thing? And I think, we did a short bit there in the class on virtue ethics, and on natural law as well, and was sort of talking about virtue in terms of Jean Valjean.
Well, there's several points you can talk about there. I mean, just stealing the loaf of bread to
Right.
get into prison, but then there's also the Champmathieu affair. I swear I don't. I'm not such a pinkies up guy when it comes to pronunciation of the foreign
Right.
language, but that's the kind of respect I have for this book. I'm not just going to say Champ Matthews or it's
Oh, right.
it's the Champmathieu affair where the guy. So this is when Victor or not Victor Hugo. I mean, it's interesting. I made that slip because I think there's different iterations of Hugo's life in the
Mm.
characters. Like he's
Mm.
obviously Marius. His middle name's Marie. He's
Mm.
obviously Jean Valjean, and he's even the little boy Gavroche.
Right. Okay.
But yeah. So Jean Valjean, he's out of prison the first time. He's this is after he's stolen the piece from Petit Gervais, the 40 sou piece or whatever it is. And he's mayor of this town. He's an industrialist. He has this factory. And somebody is accused of being Jean Valjean.
Right.
And and he's on probation at this point because of the piece that he stole from the Petit Gervais. And so if he's arrested again, he goes back to prison for life.
Right.
And one of the best parts in the novel that really shows a lot of this introspective, a lot of these psychological truths, is the tempest within the brain when Jean Valjean is deliberating. Do I go and turn myself in to save this guy, or do I stay the mayor of this town and be this industrialist? This guy who ultimately saved this town. Well, look at how much good I'm doing here. And if I went back and saved this guy, this guy's a transient. He doesn't mean much anyway. And just the back and forth. And what's great about it is he really has it in his mind. He really figured out that, no, I'm not going to go back because look at all the good I'm doing here.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You can rationalize that to yourself.
Right.
But of course, he still goes back and saves himself.
In the musical, that is all, obviously you can't be as deep an examination in the musical, but it's represented in his singing the song called Who Am I, where he does have some of that struggle. And he actually says this too. He says, I think in the musical, he says, I am the master of hundreds of workers. They all look to me. What will happen to them if I am not free? Those are the lyrics. And this is basically the same.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And so you can really make the case that he would do more good, from the utilitarian perspective. You could do more good by staying the mayor of the town and letting this guy go to jail. But of course, that's not Hugo's point, right? Hugo is a child of the Enlightenment. He's a child of this period in time where, we looked at civilization and said, maybe the individual matters.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can't simply subjugate the individual to the collective or to some military campaign. Maybe the individual mind matter, and each individual mind matters. And because of that needs to be respected. So no, you go turn yourself in, because the truth matters more than anything else. And if we don't have the truth, if we don't have the justice for Champmathieu,
right,
we don't have the civilization.
I think too, like that's the issue of identity comes up again and again in Les Mis, and I think what lies underneath a lot of that for Jean Valjean and why he goes to court to announce himself is because he knows that if he does not, he can never be what he is. He can never be Jean Valjean. He'll be forever pretending to be someone else. But more importantly, he knows that he can never be integrated. He can never be whole,
right?
Because he will always have built a false. That's a moment where he has to choose between whether he's going to continue to construct a false self or whether he's going to be who he is. And so when he chooses to announce himself, what he's doing is he's trying to lay the foundation for a sort of inward alignment that serves him as throughout the rest of the story, actually, that serves as a foundation for him to build the rest of his self on, right? The rest of his identity on.
Yeah. I mean, now we would say in our post-psychodynamic age, we would say shadow work, integrate these unseemly parts of yourself into your psyche.
Mm-hmm.
And and Jean Valjean has an identity crisis. Cosette doesn't know who he is. He's her father. She doesn't know who he is. And I kind of explain that, like some question that comes up every once in a while is, well, why doesn't Jean Valjean have a girlfriend? Isn't that kind of strange? I guess I haven't seen it, but I guess in the version where Liam Neeson plays Jean Valjean, I think it came out in 98.
Right. I haven't seen that one.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's implied that he loves Fantine. Which of course is not in the book at all, although you can kind of I don't know if it's fair to Hugo, because Hugo is far from a celibate man. He had all these mistresses and he saw prostitutes all the time. And it was accepted. I mean, he was a celebrity by the time he was 30. So actually, when he went into exile, he had a main mistress. He had his wife and a main mistress, and his mistress came into exile with them.
Wow.
lived in the house. It was just so he was a far from celibate guy. But I think the reason why, I mean, I just like to say the reason why Jean Valjean never had a girlfriend is because he didn't have an identity. Right? He
Mm.
wasn't integrated. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't do the thing fully until the end, until he admits to Cassette Marius who he is. Right.
Right.
That's when he finally becomes honest, and of course, that's when he can die.
Well, that's the culmin when he admits to Marius, when he tells Cosette what has actually happened in her life. This is the culmination of his journey, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
um, so when he admits who he is in court, and then he promises Fantine to care for Cosette, and it's a huge part of the underlying narrative there is that he develops his identity through the keeping of his promise, right? And the reason that he doesn't marry, the reason he doesn't have a girlfriend, etc., is that his promise excludes for him all sorts of normal life, right? And so, like, we see the profundity of his commitment to his word through his sacrifice of normal life, and so the payoff for that, of course, is that he is rewarded he's rewarded at the end with basically paradise, right? And so what you see in Jean Valjean really is really about a man who, through his profound commitment to his word, to his promise keeping, essentially becomes a saint. I mean, and in the movie, Marius even says this, and so his sacrifice is extreme in the service of his promise.
Right. Yeah, he becomes a saint. He dies in a sense. He can move on into the next realm. I think Hugo has a very liberal interpretation of death in his novels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that, really struck me when I first read the novel in college is I didn't know, obviously I'm in college. I have my own struggles. I'm 20 years out of college. I still have plenty of struggles, right? But just the way that Hugo predicts a guy struggling with the truth, whether to come clean, through the portrayal of Marius when he separates from his grandfather, from his royalist grandfather, and joins this band of Republican young men in the ABC. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the struggle that you need to go through to really integrate yourself and to really mature so you can get to the place where Jean Valjean is at the end of truth and, to be able to go on into the next realm, whatever you interpret that to mean. I mean, up until that time, I really never saw that portrayed in such an intricate, honest way. Reading the part of Marius, I mean, he was my age when I first read the book, and I thought, oh my God, this is what I'm going through. Mm-hmm. This is exactly what I'm going through. And I guess part of the reason why I think it's really important to talk about this book is especially young men are always looking, how do we develop? Mm-hmm. How do we become the guy who we know that we deep down can be? And I think right now there is a surfeit of mindset, affirmations, do your gratitude list and all this stuff, which I'm not saying not to do that, but there's this undercurrent there that you need to tap into. And part of it is you may need to be in misery for quite a long time. I mean, like Jean Valjean, you need to spend 19 years in prison, not unlike, the Count of Monte Cristo and then Dante's, you need to spend a certain amount of time in prison getting food thrown at you, the psychological version of that. Mm-hmm. And, to really question who you are and what you believe in and all those things. So you can get to this place where you can be honest.
One of the other things I will say about Les Mis is another of the important themes is the futility of politics to bring about a truly human world. Right?
Of course, yeah.
And and so this is why everyone at the barricade gets slaughtered. And
well, it's why Hugo, I think, chose ultimately, I don't know this to be true, but it's why he chose ultimately to depict the 1832 revolution, because he knew it was a total failure. I mean, eventually it was a success in 1848, but it was a total failure. Yeah.
Right. And so, the theme is that it is Jean Valjean and his promise keeping, his almost accidental pursuit of virtue, right? Like, I don't think of him as a character who's thinking, what is the virtuous thing to do here? He is only ever thinking about his promise and his love for Cosette. So let me finish that first point. So the point is the only hope for any kind of truly human world is one in which human beings keep their promises, and through that are shaped into certain sorts of maturity and virtue. And that politics is in fact a kind of defense mechanism against that young men, particularly young men, fall into thinking that if we can create the right political conditions, then my inner pain will dissolve, because it's not part because it's easy to imagine that your inner difficulties are not part of the human condition, but they're part of the political regime in which you happen to be living. It's as if they're a historical accident instead of endemic to human nature.
Right. I mean, if we're talking about young men trying to develop, trying to be who they need to be ultimately who they are, I think politics is a huge distraction now, and it's all about, oh, what this one politician did or didn't say, or can you believe this? And
right.
Yeah, I think the novel on the backdrop of the 1832 revolution just shows, I mean, by the way, what they're going through is way worse than what you're going through now. I mean, not to, play the thing of like the first world problems thing.
Right.
But it's so much bigger than that. And once you can manage your own issues, once you can go on Twitter and look at all the things that are horrible and realize, oh, this is me. Or once you can read a novel by somebody who has a dramatic genius, if nothing else, Victor Hugo, and go, oh, wait, why is it that what Marius is going through is exactly what I'm going through? Why is it all these thoughts that Jean Valjean has when in the Tempest in the Brain chapter, when he's deciding whether to go, to do the right thing and, justice for Shot Manchu? Why is it exactly my thoughts? And your brain starts to work, and then immediately as you start to think, oh, these issues may be my issues, just unconsciously you don't look at politics anymore. Right. I don't think your politics change. I think that's pretty much stable, but you're much less likely to be political. I mean, ultimately, the biggest so-called political movement, or the biggest political thing you can do is how it's represented in the novel, when Jean Valjean is honest with Cosette and Marius. When you can sit down and be honest with the people who you love, i.e., integrate your shadow in a healthy way. That's the biggest political revolution of your life.
Right.
And thinking that it's, oh, whether it's the Bourbons or Louis Philippe, this guy is still in charge, he's so terrible. That's all a distraction. I know it feels right. I know it feels right. And you can point to things that Louis Philippe has done that are objectively wrong, and you're right about that, but you can still be right about something and completely miss the point.
Right. And I think there's a sense in which, in our time, what we see is, and I think, accelerated by our technology, is really a compulsive outrage, which has become a kind of addiction that people use to avoid all of these real issues. That you see it on Twitter constantly, and it's very and like most compulsive behaviors, it's difficult for people to give up, especially when it's so normalized.
And we all do it, and we all have that thing. And I'm not saying everybody is the same morally, but it's all of our struggle to realize the truth. The truth isn't something that you simply say or decide to say in a moment. It's comes from this deeper well of awareness and realizing where your issues come from. And
right.
If you can't do that, there's the truth, the lowercase t truth of this person on Twitter is wrong,
right,
which factually may be, very much true.
Right.
Then there's the capital T truth of, oh, I want to get resentful about this. It's really about resentment I had with my father and the way that he treated me when I was 8.
Right.
But really, that's not even true. That's about how I have, that issue is not my fault, but I am perpetuating that issue by not managing the resentment in a healthy way.
Right.
And I don't want to look at all that. So I'm just going to point to how this other person on Twitter is wrong.
Yes. And I think here is the thing that nobody talks about because it's embarrassing, but for whatever reason, but what Les Mis is ultimately about is about love and about its power. In the book my book, I talk at the end a little bit about love as power, and that, and Les Mis is a good example of that, because honestly, after he adopts Cosette, right, Jean Valjean's life is organized around that love. And it is in that love that he finds the power to keep his promises. And it's his promise keeping then that shapes his identity. And so, there's just a theme of what love does to us that runs through Les Mis that is also, I just thought, worth commenting on.
Yeah, well, as Hugo would say, as first Aristotle said, and as Hugo would agree, you can't have love without virtue.
Right. I think that is true.
So it's part of, looking at your development, and you can find virtue. And I think that's the point of calling it Les Miserables. You can find virtue. I mean, not dissimilar from the title of your book, Common Good. It's like, it's looking at the lowest rung of society. I mean, that's not really what you're doing in the book, but it sounds like the intention behind your book is very much the, how Hugo developed the novel of Les Miserables, because, some of the stuff in the novel, he saw these things. He experienced them or heard about them through a friend that I think famously, he witnessed, I think he witnessed this. He witnessed a prostitute, she was getting made fun of by some bourgeois guy, and she took snow and put it down the back of his coat, which of course what Fantine does, and that's ultimately why she gets arrested. He notices this stuff, so he's out there living and seeing things, and he can find, the good isn't from the top down, it's from the bottom up. It's noticing what, even the lowest rung of society, Gavroche, this urchin boy who was born into this terrible family who doesn't care about him precisely because he's a boy, throws him out on the street. You find the most virtuous behavior in that. And I think, that's the process, it seems to me. And what I really liked about your book is the process of you just noting your experience. Like, this is what I see, and here's where I see virtue in this. Here's where I see a representation of virtue, and here's where I see a representation of vice. And here's, my interpretation of what's going on. You're not in some ivory tower, chair or anything like that. Right. You're experiencing things, you're seeing things, and you can point to, this is why this is virtuous based on my observation. This is why this is vice. You don't have to read some guy named Descartes to figure this stuff out. Like, we are all philosophers in that sense. And I think, I mean, what I really appreciate about your book more than anything else is the process behind it. And it seems very similar to the process behind, Les Miserables. So,
well, certainly, certainly Les Mis was has been a big influence on my thinking, but I would hesitate to put our books in the same category of quality, but yes, and I think this is part of the part of related to talking about Les Mis. Part of the theme is that while there may not be political equality, there is a kind of moral equality that is accessible to everyone.
Right.
And that's sort of what you're saying. It's like that there is a kind of there is that everyone has like an equal opportunity to behave, not even behave, but to sort of prioritize the good.
Right. And whether it comes from the bottom rung of society or the top rung, it's the same thing. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah, and some of the most profound virtues, acts of virtue. Whether this politician who you like signs this bill that you like or doesn't sign a bill, depending on what your politics are, that is completely immaterial. What is material is as you're scrolling through Twitter, can you at least entertain the idea that you're looking at parts of yourself that you don't want to see, that you don't want to admit that are you?
I think part of maturing in this way is being able to begin to sort of understand what is subordinate and what is first order. And so I think, as far as politics goes, particularly, in terms of people reacting on social media, etc., I think there is a kind of upside downness in many people's minds, where politics, which ought to be subordinate to all of us, to the question of our own integration, maturity, character, etc., is actually elevated above our, sort of resolution of our personal struggles. And so it's not to say that all politics is irrelevant and all politics is a waste of time and all, et cetera, but that politics, insofar as it is the art of living together, has to be subordinate to being the kind of person who could be a good neighbor to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, the way I like to think about politics is it's just a projection of our unconscious issues, and the size of the government, the corruption of the government, that's just going to be directly proportional to unresolved so-called corruption of the unconscious issues of the citizens. And because like you said, that's why we look at politics. You said that 10 minutes ago. We look at, I have this issue that I either can't point to, I don't understand, or if I do understand it, I don't feel like I can resolve. And so unconscious, like you project out an issue and it happens unconsciously. You don't think, I'm going to project this issue. It happens. You put it on something else and you really think you're dealing with something out there. And that's what we do with politics. Okay, I have this issue. The politicians are going to save it. And the more issues we have, the more we put on them, and necessarily the more corrupt and unhelpful they're going to be. If anybody was in these positions of power, nobody could do anything different. Right. It's just the nature of the culture we're in and what we're dealing with. But
right.
All right. So back to Les Miserables. Where did I? Well, let me ask you this. What's your like a favorite part in the story that really stands out to you and really means something?
Well, two things. I think that I really have returned again and again to thinking about the relationship between Jean Valjean and Javert, right? And sort of how they are foils of one another, and who Javert is, and why does Javert's life end in suicide, and Jean Valjean's life ends in a good death and paradise, etc. Right? And especially like in Javert's insistence, Javert's understanding of what the good is. He generally understands the good to be the legal,
Right.
and so maybe I should just say Javert is the policeman who hunts Jean Valjean across the span of his life. In case we people don't know, but and so in the story, Jean Valjean comes to a moment where he could basically kill Javert, and he lets him go. Right. And this is ultimately what prompts Javert's suicide. And that Javert is a person who has he has built his life around the law, but that he's also obviously quite full of resentment from his own having been born to criminals, et cetera, et cetera. And it becomes clear that he is a person who essentially is furious at being itself, right? That he is a person who cannot accept the reality of the world, that the world does not function according to the law as he sees it. And so, and he's also a person who I think despises mercy in a way. And so I think sees mercy as a path for people who deserve punishment to escape it. So he sees mercy as inherently unjust. And so when Jean Valjean has mercy on him by not killing him, he sees that, he interprets that act of kindness as another act in the war between the two of them. And so thinks that by destroying himself, he can, he's trying to repudiate everything that Jean Valjean is. And I think just the way that Javert clearly constructs his world and how it then becomes, it falls apart when Jean Valjean extends this kindness to him. I've always found that very telling and fascinating.
Yeah, so is that how it's portrayed in the musical, that Javert committing suicide is a way to get back at Jean Valjean? Because I always interpreted it as, maybe I heard this from somewhere. I mean, I've read a bunch of books on Les Miserables, so I can't claim this is my original idea, but Jean Valjean taking, here's a guy who's a criminal.
Right.
That he's a bad guy. And the fact that he can do something good, like show mercy on Javert, even when Javert is after him, that does not fit into Javert's worldview. Yes. So in order, like, he can't deal with it. It's like this eruption with an eye of the unconscious. He can't deal with it. So he can't live in that world where now all his values, and now he has to look back at his entire life and say, everything I knew was totally wrong. And that's what happens to a lot of people. If they have if an existential crisis breaks you, it's because you were so committed to one way of being that you couldn't survive it. And so you just enter this perpetual state of neurosis and eventually death. And that's why, and also I think he had to kill himself because, I mean, Javert's dead body is this implied, or am I just making too much of it? Javert's dead body needed to be mistaken for Jean Valjean. So Jean Valjean had to be presumed to be dead, and Javert knew, okay, I would be, or
I don't recall that.
Is that
I don't know. But the substantial point, right?
But the psychological point matters more anyway. So.
Right. And that's what you said there is essentially what I was trying to say, right? Okay. That he cannot incorporate the moral complexity of viewing someone he assumed to be bad to do something good for him. And so, like, part of what he's trying to do is he's struggling to see Jean Valjean's mercy on him with he almost tries to see it as itself bad, he thinks that Jean Valjean's act of mercy was in fact an act of aggression toward him, right? Because he can only think of Jean Valjean as an aggressor.
Hmm.
So what happens is, like you said, his worldview crumbles because it is so rigid and so built on this particular kind of conception of human nature and the law, that when Jean Valjean does something that Javert himself would not have done, and which is unpredictable for Javert, it creates a crisis for him that his worldview
Right.
cannot endure.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, Javert is a great character. He's a great archetype. You see it all the time. You know, maybe in the relevance of modern men or young men. I mean, you know, again, we're just drunk on positivity and affirmations. So you think anything that's negative or any negative thought we have about ourselves is ultimately wrong. It just needs to be turned off. When in fact, there could be a lot of information there in that negative thought. And it's not just about turning it off. It's about, you know, looking at it, mining it for what it really is. And this may be an annoying reference for you, but you probably don't watch the show, but there's a show, Stranger Things, and there's a great Javert type character in that show in the most recent season. And in fact, when I don't know, now I regret bringing it up, but when there's this upside down world that erupts into the normal world, and when which is of course symbolic of an eruption of the unconscious, and of course when that happens, it actually splits the Javert type character into, like, he just cannot survive that kind of thing. So it's this great kind of modern rendition of the Javert character.
I saw the first season of that show, but my 15-year-old loves it. So I hear about it.
Yeah, it's a show for 15-year-olds, and
I think
I'm 40, so I really shouldn't be watching that show. But hey, maybe it's okay if I watch it if I have all these.
Right.
Then it's fine.
Academic exercise for you.
Yeah, right.
Professional development.
But I do think there are some good I think these shows are popular for a reason, and I think there's some good psychological truths. So if you're gonna watch dumb shows, at least try to be somewhat intellectual about it.
Right.
So so one of your favorite parts is the fact that Javert needs to end his life based on what Jean Valjean did.
Right. And and it's like and just sort of to think about how resentment is the character is Javert's fundamental approach to life. His resentment dominates everything for him, and his resentment of his own status, his resentment of his own family and birth, his own station, and his resentment of anyone who commits an infraction against the law and who gets away with it. He almost seems to have a view that if everyone were adequately punished, we could basically have a kind of heaven on earth. And I suppose that's, now that I say that, right, it's interesting, because in some sorts of Christian theology, there is a heavy distinction between the law and the gospel, and I think we can almost see Javert as representing the law, and Jean Valjean is representing the gospel, insofar as Javert believes that human redemption comes through adherence to the law and proper punishment and reward for that. Whereas Jean Valjean is an example of redemption that comes through love, virtue, and promise keeping, right? And that, and he is a person who finds his redemption, even though he is a criminal, right? That he is outside the law, which is where he is operating outside the law, but within the parameters of love and virtue and promise keeping. So that they are they're foils in that way, in their fundamental understanding of what the good is.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it dovetails back in what we were saying before about is politics versus morality.
Mm.
Politics, do we need to set up society in the correct way and punish people or reward people in the correct way, or do we need to foster this kind of, well, I don't even like saying that, or does each individual need to look inwards and foster in themselves an ability to wrestle with, is this good, is this bad, what do I do, what's the right action, what does it mean to connect? I have this thing called resentment, what does it mean about me?
Right.
Do we look inwards or do we look outwards?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to be more conceptual about what a human is, or are we going to be more concrete bound and just look at rewards? It sounds very much Javert would be in favor of a B.F. Skinner Walden too.
Right,
right, set up society and like it's just the right rewards and punishments, but you don't take into account this thing called, for lack of a better term, soul.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we have a consciousness, that we have free will to some extent. Like I always say, like communism, Marxism works if you treat humans no differently than you would treat a factory or a coal mine.
Right.
Then it all makes sense. But it's just based on this flawed perception of human nature. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's what Javert represents, the 19th century version of that.
Mm-hmm. That's probably true.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess my favorite part of the novel is somewhat similar in a sense. I don't know if this is portrayed in the musical, but Jean Valjean standing with Cosette, and this is towards the midpoint of the novel, so they're together. I think Cosette's a teenager. This could be right around or maybe right after they meet Marius, or they see him at the Luxembourg at the gardens, and they see a train of criminals go by in their cage, and they're being whipped and they're in chains. And it's just this really heavy scene of them two witnessing this. And of course, Cosette with her innocent perspective. And then there's Jean Valjean, which is, I'm still that.
Right.
And Cosette asks Jean Valjean something to the effect of, are they men, or can they ever become men? And Jean Valjean's response is, sometimes. Because that just portrays everything. Like, what are we, right? Are we this animal that gives into our our impulses, our ultimately self-destructive impulses, or are we this thing that can see truth and morality beyond that, as represented by Jean Valjean's life? And I just think in that, I you just got to read that passage, because the way that Hugo describes it is obviously something I can't even come close to giving. Yeah.
Right. But also, the trainload of criminals, right, is just exactly what you're saying. It's kind of this industrial approach to people, the reduction of people to objects and to a commodity.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm what one of my I guess I would say unpopular views, right? There's that mean unpopular opinion.
Right.
Unpopular opinion, I think putting people in cages as punishment is a travesty. And we only do it because it's this holdover from this time where we didn't know any better. And now we do know better and we still do it. I mean, not that you don't take, obviously you take criminals or people who are going to be dangerous to other people out of civilization, of course. But the fact that we put them in cages and still chain them up, I think is absolutely awful. And I think in 100, it's going to be one of those things, I think, like slavery, like we look back and how could there possibly be slavery? I mean, this is awful. In 150 years, we're going to look back and be like, how? So we thought we were going to put a guy in a cage and he was going to get better.
Right.
Like, what are we thinking?
Right.
I know.
Yeah, cool. I mean, this is way off the original topic, but clearly there is a need for a certain kind of reform of the prison system, etc. That I think reasonable people should undertake, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess the part of the reason I want to talk about Les Miserables is because not just Les Miserables, right? But as I kind of hinted at before, it's like this part of this instruction manual, and not just telling you what to do, like, hey, do these things, don't do these things, like any idiot who has Marcus Aurelius as their avatar on Twitter can tell you. But it's there's actually a way to live life. Not so much a way to live life, but there's this development that we all need to go through, and it's archetypal, it's in us. That's why, you know, we go see a movie, and it's the same movie that came out last year effectively,
Right.
It's, you know, I haven't seen the new Top Gun, but I'm betting it's a lot like, and has all the same lessons, and it follows the same structure as the original Top Gun. Yet why do we need to see it? Because we need to see ourselves. We need to see what we go through. And there's an intricate, explicated version of this called novels that has all this great information in there. And your mindset training, again, I'm not saying to stop doing that, but it doesn't touch this deeper. It doesn't show you what you need to do. It doesn't provide you with the understanding and dare I say empathy that you need to really come out of these, to acknowledge these dark aspects of yourself and come out of them. So I guess in that vein, I mean, what else do you look towards besides Les Miserables? I mean, what's another favorite novel that you think is in this vein?
Yeah, you know, I have not for years been a big fiction reader, right? But so let me think about it for a moment, right? In terms of like powerful stories. Um here is let me make a movie recommendation that I think probably you've never seen, and most of your listeners have probably never seen. And it's a film. It's another film I used to show to. Let's talk about films because that's easier for me because I've seen
Great.
movies.
Yeah.
I've not read a lot of fiction for the last many years. Um, I used to show students an old movie from the early '60s called "Lonely Are the Brave." I don't know if you know that film or not. It's based on a novel by Edward Abbey, who was also a massive influence on me when I was 19. Edward Abbey was the father of what we now call the radical environmental movement. Okay, and but this novel, this movie is based on his novel that I believe is called Fire on the Mountain. But the movie is called Lonely Are the Brave, and it is about the last cowboy. And it's set in 1962, but you don't know that for the first 5 minutes of the movie because it's literally a guy dressed as if he's in the Old West riding his horse through the desert.
Well, I'm sorry, you said 1952.
1962.
1962. Okay.
Sorry. I believe it's 1962.
Okay.
And it's about sort of the struggle of the individual against the increasingly industrialized and conformed consumer culture. And it is a tragedy. All right. So I don't know if this is a big spoiler, but industrial consumer culture wins in the end.
No way.
And which I think is interesting for Abbey because, you know, he hated industrial consumer culture as much as anybody could. And but that film I think is good insofar as it represents the sort of historic heroic struggle of the individual, even if even in circumstances where he doesn't, like Jean Valjean, end up winning, right? There continues to be value in sort of maintaining one's integrity, even in situations where what is arrayed against you is overwhelming. And you have to ask your, and the question it's presenting to you is, what is the value of being an integrated person, even when your culture is pressuring you to do otherwise? I think Lonely Are the Brave is a very very profound movie that touches on some of these important issues.
Yeah. We don't have all the vices we had in the 19th century. We have different vices now because now we live in this post-industrial age where you can have anything at the click of a button. I mean, I was thinking, and it's like this is the modern struggle, and it's like anything. Like, I don't want to resist that because in a way it's kind of gross that we have a Wendy's on every corner, but also it's good because 200 years ago people were starving to death.
Right.
But it's like, how do we take this thing and integrate it in a healthy way? And I think it just comes back to, are you integrated?
Right.
And if you're not, then you're just gonna take your vices out on food. Right now we have obesity as an issue, of course. Right. But
speaking of vices, I just was noticing this day before. I remember when I was a kid in the 1970s and even into the 80s, there was a lot of talk in our culture about alcoholism. Okay. There were TV movies about the dangers of alcoholism. There were talk shows about alcoholism and all of that. And now in popular culture, you never hear that mentioned, right? Like, I can't think of a single television series or movie in the last probably close to 20 years where alcoholism. No, that's not true. I can think of a couple of movies, but it has disappeared from our mainstream popular culture discussion at the level where it was in, say, 1979. And I just think that is interesting because it's almost like our culture has spun out so much that just being an alcoholic now is considered a lighter problem to manage. I suppose that what I'm saying is that, you do go through these historic eras where concerns about different vices come in waves, right? They are they ebb and flow, the concern about them in culture.
Yeah, I don't think we're consuming any less alcohol than we did in the 1970s. I actually don't know. Maybe we are.
Right. Yes, I don't know either, but my impression, I think I have heard that in fact culturally we are consuming less, but one way or another, I just made the anecdotal observation that you used to, 50 years ago, 45 years ago, hear a lot more about the problems of alcoholism in public discussion.
Yeah. Or maybe it's just become like the fat acceptance thing. Like, once enough people are alcoholics, then it's just, that's just our culture. And once enough people are obese, it's like, no, this is just who we are. And we're going to put them on the cover of, swimsuit magazines or whatever. But that is time. I know you got to get going. I got to get going. So thanks for being part of this discussion, Dean.
Thank you.
Thanks for entertaining my obsession. Speaking of obsession with Les Miserables, this is my actual my Les Miserables t-shirt.
Oh yeah,
it just has text from the book.
Oh, fantastic! I want one
on the shirt. Which, if you didn't know, I like Les Miserables. If you didn't,
now you do. Right.
Yeah, this indicates my love for Les Miserables. It also indicates the fact that really need a girlfriend, I think that's another indication.
Right.
But anyways, okay, so Twitter account. I'm going to put that on the description. Anything else? I'm going to put a link to your book.
Okay, great. Yeah, at Dean Abbott. My books, both of my books are available on Amazon. Just search my name; they'll come up.
Okay. Well, hey, Dean, thanks again for doing this. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. Let's do it again sometime.